Hi, good evening. Thanks for coming. Let's just get started. This is the great Abel Ferrara. Abel, as you know, I think most of you know, has a film in the festival. It screened a couple of times last week, 444 Last Day on Earth. If you missed it, it has a distributor. IFC Films will be opening it early next year.
Thank you. Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you, Mariana. Thank you, everybody at IFC. Discuss the price later. Still negotiating. All right, so that light's gonna be my face.
What
is that? For that? That's for that. Okay, that's fine.
Is that bothering you? Should we...
No. I got worse things. In case everybody forgets where we are. You know, our films and independent films go exactly where Wall Street goes. You know, unfortunately, okay? And when in the early 80s, when, you know, we were making Driller Killer, blah, 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 you know, we made these films in school, came out, 9 Lives, Driller Killer, Miss 45, and then when, you know, the oil crisis and the crash there, and then we crashed with them. You know, then we came back again and doing the TV shit, getting going, everything's rolling, blah, blah, blah. You know, independent film business gets taken down by some over-greedy producers, you know, who took down a pretty good system we had going between, say, 91 and 96, 97. I mean, unless you got a way to film yourself in front of a mirror, you know, you're not going to be independent. But I guess that what it means is you're outside the system, right? Okay, so if you're going to make films outside the system, it is not easy. And I remember Oliver, when we first started making films, Oliver calls this the worst day of all our lives. Back when I was getting out of school, I think this Carter was the president, they had a 10-to-1 write-off on oil wells, and this 10-to-1 tax write-off also worked for films. If the films didn't make money, which was perfect for us, okay? So getting out of school, we were in offices like Goldman Sachs kind of places where these guys are looking at us going, the perfect guys. You know, it's like that, who was that play and that movie with, you know, when they did, you know, Springtime for Hitler. Yeah, the producers. This is a perfect thing. Us knuckleheads come in there, you know, our hair down our waist with some screwball idea, and these guys are looking to lose money. And it works if they lose money, but they don't. You can't even tell a filmmaker you gotta lose money, okay? But they figured we were a good shot at it. And these were offices we never got back into for 20 years, you know, and they were ready to throw money at us. And Carter changes the law. It's one of these things they didn't even think twice about. It was a law that was should be changed because of the oil well situation, but it killed independent financing for films. And when that happened, believe me, you could see those lines in the, you know, well, they don't have IMDb now, but that graph went whoa, you know, in terms of making films. But I remember Oliver was like,
Oliver
Stone. Another independent New York filmmaker. Only, you know, that's the other story. That's how you do it, guys, if you're doing it. I don't see too many young filmmakers, but whenever we talk at schools, that's how you do it. So we're back in New York after 9/11 was the perfect excuse for, you know, California, you know, LA not to come to New York, right? They don't like making films in New York anyway. So all these, you know, bullshit lies that, oh, the Teamsters, the unions, the this, the that, they just were afraid of New York, which probably they had reasons to, you know, because you walk around New York with a pink shirt, you know, and beige pants. Not like have that dull look on your face. You know, it's going to be more expensive. Okay, you gotta, you know. That's a losing battle, you know what I mean? It's just not that. In LA, films is commerce, man. That's what it is. That's a factory town. You make films. Directors are some guys that get in the way. You know, I mean, really, a director is a guy that you try to avoid. And so when these movies are made by writers or, you know, executives or who really cares who the director is, you know, and then you know, than in Rome. So that's basically what happened. So we came to Italy, and you know, we made, you know, we had to kind of ground ourselves and get our shit back together. So we made Mary, we made Go-Go Tales. For reasons I don't want to discuss, they weren't released and distributed in New York, although IFC offered to buy both films, all right? And I don't want to get into why, okay, right now. But they weren't, okay? But those films were cool films, and they were films we believed in, the films we made, you know, they were the films we wanted to make. I also did a play with, and I forget, Edward Albee, called Tiny Alice, in Italian, which was really a great experience for me. Hey, you know Edward Albee? Anybody know Edward Albee? Yeah, okay, fine. You gotta see, this play is incredible too. It's the first play he did after, Who's Afraid? Imagine a young kid, he writes Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, wins every award on Broadway, wins every award in California, Oscars, the whole deal. Now he sits down, spends a year writing his masterpiece, and they basically boo him out of the theater, out of town, to the point where he actually, you know, made the absolute mortal sin, ultimate mistake of taking a page out in the New York Times to try to counter the criticism. Big mistake. Don't do it. You know what I mean? We were blackballed for a while. I mean, after the King of New York.
I don't think anyone's blackballed.
Well, we liked it. It's a nice word, right?
But anyway,
they didn't like The Funeral, fine. They didn't like Bad Lieutenant, fine. They didn't like The Addiction, fine. They don't like Our Christmas, fine. They don't like, I mean, give me a break. At some point, it's like, really? I mean, really? Every single one of those films, not one, all of them made in New York, all of them made by New York people. I had to start my own film festival, the New York Film Independent Film Video, Stuart Olson's. You pay, I know, you pay $300, it looks like we're ripping everybody off, but the point is, you pay for the projectionist and no one passes judgment on your film. Everybody plays, okay? Everybody's, you know, has the right to be in a festival. No one is sitting there saying, this film is in and this film is out, which is a gig I would never want. Thank you for choosing our film. And you should have seen the circumstances that they took 444.
Do you want to talk about that? No.
Yeah, we'll get to
later. We'll get to that. Well, if Richard shows up, we can ask him about the other.
Yeah,
films,
where is he?
Okay, Go-Go Tales, which I think a lot of people have seen because it actually did play at Anthology earlier.
Please, I mean, how many people saw Go-Go Tales?
See?
Not bad. How many people paid to see it? That's even better, really. We got some fans. These are some hardcore fans here. That's some hardcore fans, all right.
I just wanted to hear you talk a little bit about the circumstances of making that film. It was a New York City film set almost entirely within a New York City club, which you recreated at the Cinecittà Studios in Rome. But I know that you originated Go-Go Tales years before, while you were still in New York. Can you talk a little bit about shifting and having to, you know, reconstruct New York City?
The idea was, we had done Subway Stories, which was a funny bit right there, because Rosie Perez one day asked me, would you like to do an episode of her show? I said, great. This was in like October. One day in May, somebody's knocking downstairs at the place, and they're saying, we're here for the location scout. I says, you're at the wrong job. What location scout? For Subway Stories. You're supposed to be on location scout. I said, are you kidding me? Okay, so that's how HBO works. Anyway, so we do that. We get buddy-buddy with all these guys because Spike had done an episode, pretty good episode, but they wanted to edit it, and he wouldn't let him edit it, and it became a really big deal, right? They wouldn't, you know, and they tried to get me involved, you know. I'm saying, I'm not watching it, I'm not telling, you know, and I'm saying, you guys gotta be crazy, because some of these episodes of Subway Stories, you know. So anyway, I became friends with these guys, Colin Calendar, actually, who I saw at the opening party. Okay, so anyway, I'm saying I got the perfect, and they weren't doing really well. This was before Sopranos and, Sex and the City. And we presented Go-Go Tales as a show, an HBO show. but they took Sex and the City and and Sopranos, you know, and didn't take ours, which, you know, brought me to tears. I boycotted the premiere of Subway Stories, so I don't think anyone noticed. And, you know, and they were, you know, when these guys want something, you know, when you call people for something and, you know, to get a reaction or, you know, you give them a script, you this or that, or you want something from somebody above you, it's always like, well, I called them on Friday, maybe I should wait till Monday, or I called them yesterday, maybe give them another. When these guys want something from you, they call from 6 o'clock in the morning until they get what they want. You know what I mean? It's like, they wanted me to be there. Anyway, it turns out one of the big executives used to hang out in this go-go club, which was on 20th Street. So that was the end of that. So, you know, I was screaming, you know, Reese's Italian, you know, anti-Italianism on Sopranos, but I was really, the thing was designed to be a weekly series, okay? And I had the idea of using it as we'd shoot live. Like the beginning would be live and you could actually go to the club. And the end would be live every week. So if you wanted to go to the club, you could actually be on TV, right? Really, it sounded great. Anyway, that didn't work, all right? And they did Subway, they did Sex and the City and Sopranos. Two bad choices. No, that's turned that company totally around. All right, then we get involved with Jay-Z and his partner. What's his name? Damon. Okay, we're gonna do this film. I remember I was with Damon, and I said, he was making films. I said, he says, how much is this film gonna cost? I says, film's gonna cost $300,000. This is how crazy I was then. He says, I got it in my pocket. I said, well, get it out of your pocket. And let's make the film. Now, we go downtown to this crazy sculptor who actually put that bull, you know that great bull that's down on Wall Street? Well, this crazy Sicilian made that bull without anyone asking, and one day dropped it down in Wall Street. And you know, me and everyone else figured, oh, it was commissioned by the city and everything is there, but he just put it there. And no one said anything because everybody else thought it was commissioned. And then 10 years later, this guy's awesome, this guy's awesome. He now is bitching about paying taxes. Why should he pay taxes when he gave this great gift to the city? It cost $1 million. All right, now, and we got, okay, not blackballed, but we never came back, okay. So we had an anniversary to celebrate that. But anyway, so when I was here, they asked me to be in the film they were shooting. So I went to Chelsea, and I really didn't have that much to do with the Chelsea, but she had some crew, I forget it, after 5 minutes I says, hey honey, put this stuff away, tell these guys to go home. You know, you can't make a film about this place like this. You know, you want to do it, we'll do it. You know, let's raise some money and do it right. Because they were telling me the place is going to be closed, it's this, it's that. I said, okay, let's try it. And, you know, because we had been shooting a documentary for 2 weeks, so I figured I was an expert on documentaries. You know, and Michael Moore is my hero, right? So, yeah, so that basically it. Then once we started, so now between 2 years, it took 2 years to finish the film in Naples and here, and as we're shooting these, you know, funny thing in Chelsea is she would just have, me and Kenny, you know, our group, she would have like a room number, we would go and knock on the door, and the door would open. And in Chelsea, you don't know if it's gonna be one 85-year-old woman sitting on a bed in a room the size of, you know, here, who hasn't left, you know, sitting there with her 2 cats for the last 12 years. Or you're gonna open up to 13 rambling rooms and, you know, Botticelli paintings on the fucking walls. You know, you don't know who's living behind these doors, you know what I mean? It was like unbelievable, just say, all right, who is this person? And just go up and knock on the door, you know. And, you know, Chelseans are like Neapolitans. You say hi, and that's the end of the interview. You know, they go on for a half hour because they've been waiting to be the star of a movie. You know, they've been waiting to be the star of a movie for like 10 years, right? I mean, we've got 400 movies based on Napoli, and Chelsea on the Bronx. And we should intercut these 2 movies, you know. So after hearing this bullshit for a while, then I'm starting to say, you know, I don't know how much, I think, you know, some of our stories are more truthful than some of this, man, you know. So I'm starting to think about, or the first thing was that the Sid Vicious murder, right? So, you know, the guy who runs it, like, he tries to act like that, you know, Nancy died, like, in a hotel around the corner. That didn't happen there. And he says, oh, no, you can't have the Sid Vicious murder. I said, dude, if you stand outside this hotel, 1 out of 3 people coming by say, there's the hotel, you know, not the hotel Dylan wrote Blonde on Blonde, not the hotel, you know, Dylan Thomas died. No, that's the place where Sid killed Nancy. And all the people there, the older guys, or the guys whose uncles were the guys back then, all tell you, well, you know, Sid didn't kill Nancy. Everybody knows that. Well, everybody don't know that, and I don't know that. And then it started getting about, okay, so we're gonna recreate Sid killing Nancy, or not killing Nancy. And like the last thing I wanted to do with that, I just want to talk about Chelsea Hotel. I didn't want to out a substitute teacher in New Jersey who might or might not accidentally stabbed some crazy girl, because I actually went on a date with Nancy Spungen. Okay, and I really feel sorry for her mother. You know, did you ever read the book, her mother's book on her? That's the book. Anyway, so bottom line is, okay, you know, we're narrative filmmakers and we write fiction, but it's almost like I think fiction could get to it sometimes more than people, quote unquote, telling you the truth, especially when there's a camera on somebody. So we started intermingling both these films. And we got hammered by the critics in both cases, and probably rightfully so, because, you know, these things, you know, you just don't, like they said, we were saying on stage last night, the other night, Tony says, it's a process. Well, we don't exactly got that process down, down perfect, but we're working on it, you know, and the idea of what you get in a documentary and that kind of acting, and the kind of acting somebody like Keitel, you know, when I used to work with Harvey and we'd be like thinking about a film to do, and he would just tell 1 week in Harvey's life is more interesting than any fucking script you ever read in your life, including Bad Lieutenant. And I'm thinking, why don't we just put the truck outside and you come and we'll follow you around? I mean, he'll tell you stories make your hair stand up. You know? And so somewhere in between what you get, you know, natural acting, real acting, non-actors acting, real actors being in a documentary, you know, what's the truth, what's fiction, you know, it's a process, you know, what film you're actually gonna make, you know, how important is the script, does the script get in your way some of the time, you know, does the conventions of cinema actually holding you back? What are the conventions of cinema? You know, what is it is expected? You know, how different is a convention when one kid, you know, people I'm seeing watching films are on the subway and they're watching a film like this, okay, between stops. Okay, that's who's watching films. You know, I think the whole process of the cinema is, other than kids getting out of their mother's house, is people like my age on a nostalgic trip trying to recapture some kind of lost thing. I don't know if these kids really, I don't know, you know.
How do you do it? I mean, if you look at, those of you who've seen 444, I mean, you see the couple in the film, they're surrounded by screens. I mean, that's like a very big part of their lives, TVs and computers and iPads, and I'm wondering, how do you consume?
How do I watch films?
Yeah.
You know, the thing is, because when we're working on films, when I get off, quote unquote off, the last thing I want to do is look at a film, because I'm now geared into like, oh, okay, that shot don't work, move that around, who hired that chick, why is that thing, you know, where's the sound man, you know what I mean? So I kind of see films when I could judge, I get to be a judge. I go to these film festivals, I never leave the, you know, the interview area, you know. Why are you fixated on the world coming to an end? Okay, answer that question 38 times. Okay, and that's your job, okay? You don't get to see, you say, wow, all these great films, I want to see Billy Friedkin's new film, this guy, you know. So, you know, I mean, I enjoyed seeing Polanski's film in the, you know, under the circumstances of the opening night here, you know, and Why that film was chosen for opening night, that's another question. Why it was blogged, but then I read the blogs, you know, my favorite guys.
Which blogs do you read?
I don't know who they are, but they look official, and I'm told by my guys who are looking at, you know, Kenny, my ex, the Green Beret, DP, who's ready to come underneath, because he's convinced they're all in their mother's cellar. And they're only there to destroy us. And so we have to, like, I can imagine him coming up underneath their room, like with a Con Ed hard hat on, and a knife about this big, and this kid's gonna wake up with the DP he just trashed, like coming through the bottom of his bed. Anyway, so now I'm walking around New York in the last few weeks now that I've been reading these, and I'm looking for sellers. Right, I'm actually looking like, there's not a lot of sellers, you know, I'm looking for basement apartments with some kid hunched over, you know, a computer to knock on the window and say, "You're writing about us." But, you know, you can't write back. They all hurt. You know, everything hurts. I mean, my problem with them is it's like very, I don't get the passion in it, man. You know, if you're gonna rip somebody up, rip them up. You know what I mean? I don't get the passion in the filmmaking. I don't get this dismissive trip. I mean, how do you dismiss? You could take that movie by Polanski one way or another, whether you thought it was in his world, his kind of film, whether he did it as a gig, but the filmmaking art, you know, is really extraordinary. I mean, it's really extraordinary. And I don't know, maybe it's only because you have to know what I know. I don't think so. I mean, the way he filmed those people, the way he got those performances, just the soundtrack on that motherfucker was really exceptional. So the way, then you read, in a battle between theater, I remember this quote, a battle between theater and cinema, Polanski loses. So thanks, dude. You know, but anyway, this is what I want to talk about, because how, you're a film critic, okay, and this guy's really a great film critic, not that, you know, he writes well about us, but, you know, because I come from the school of film criticism, okay, where, like, when you want to put down a film, you just don't write about it. I mean, you know, this is the Godard, Truffaut, Besson, this is the school of real cinema writing that lasts, man. You write about what you passionately dig, and you write about it. And then you don't write about anything else. If a film doesn't move you, it doesn't get you, drop it, man. You know, forget it. You know, it's negative. It's negative to everything. I mean, anyway, but tell me about, I mean, you're a film critic, right? Talk about how you got the gig, and with it, how do you see criticism? No, it's a serious question. It's a serious question. How did you go about wanting to be a critic, and how do you see criticism going in this internet age?
Really? You want to hear about this?
Absolutely. Does anybody else want to hear?
Yes.
You laid it out, right? There's a lot more of it. There's a lot more blogs. But you know, I don't think it's fair to dismiss all bloggers. Obviously, there's some are better than others. Wait, what was the question? How's it going in the internet age?
I'm saying, what made you want to be a film critic?
I love movies.
Right. Okay. So you decided to criticize as opposed to make films, which is very valid to me, because without criticism, the films don't work. That's why I'll take all the bloggers, because you got to be writing about them. You know, does a film exist in an empty theater? You know what I mean? Does a film exist if it's not being discussed, if it's not being written about? Now, that's what I'm saying. All right. So you chose why? Yeah, it's not so easy to answer these questions.
No, it really is not.
Well, we're all waiting for the answer. So.
No, wait. What are we?
What made you want to be a film critic?
I don't know that I can answer that beyond what I said. I mean,
Because you love films,
yeah.
and you love writing, and you think it's important.
Yeah, I care about it.
Fine, you care about it, and you think it's important, and I think it's important too. That's why I read about them, and I'm not knocking them. And in the end, it's really my fault, because if these guys don't get it and they don't dig it, I didn't get to them. You know, I somehow, now I'm thinking I'm gonna, other than strangling this motherfucker. You always read the reviews.
Even back in the day when you...
Shit, yeah, you crazy. How many are there? I mean, it's not that many.
Well, now there are a lot.
Yeah, there's a lot, you know. What was I gonna say? The first review we ever, the best review we ever got was Driller Killer. I remember it was with Kelch. And this was one of the worst reviews we ever, but the guy at least was passionate, okay? He said the director of this movie made Tobe Hooper, who he wasn't too big on, made Tobe Hooper look like Federico Fellini. Okay? This guy not only trashed the movie, he trashed the party we had. He said, the only people that could possibly like this movie, these liquored up friends of theirs, that they liquored him up before the film. Then, and I didn't forget this, we were totally broke, and we were gonna have like a little party, you know, what we thought hors d'oeuvres. I could just imagine hors d'oeuvres, you know, like pretzels and onions or something, right? But we showed this movie down in the it was on 2nd Avenue, I think, on 13th Street. There was that theater. They talked to me to let us use this, and it was our big premiere. You know, invite your mother to see the Driller Killer. But I remember we had the last $5 I had, and I'm saying, should I get these strawberries? And I go, yeah, that'll put it over the top. We were gonna be, somebody might come from, you know, gonna review the film. I says, let me get these strawberries. You know, I'll spend our last money. It's a good investment. And in the variety goes, and on top of it, they serve rotten strawberries. And I'm saying, I know those fucking strawberries weren't rotten because I picked every one of them out of the thing, you know. So that was my introduction. But we're happy as larks. We're jumping up and down on the street. We're in Variety, man. We're in Variety. What did they say? Who the fuck knows? Oh, they say we're horrible. We should quit making movies. You know? Great. You know, look, they're still in it, you know. So, yeah, we read it, you know. And we're going to stop making movies behind them, but...
I'm sure there are questions. Why don't we take some? Yes.
I got to meet Victor Argo like maybe a few months before he died.
Yeah, that's really sad.
Really great actor.
Yeah.
And he's in a lot of your movies.
Right.
And probably King of New York was the piece de resistance. He was really great in that. It seemed like maybe his biggest role that he ever had.
You know, he was a friend, and he was, you know, supportive of everyone. You know, he's a Puerto Rican cat who played country western music. You know, so we used to play guitars. I mean, you know, we used to sing George Jones songs. You know, I used to teach him all kinds of shit on the guitars. And he always, when things were really bad, he'd give me a guitar. And he'd always say, you're not gonna pawn this guitar. I swear on my mother. He says, I'll kill you if you pawn this guitar. I'm gonna give you this guitar. You're not gonna sell this. No, Victor, I swear on my mother, no matter what. You know. So he was that kind of guy. And he was also Harvey's very, very closest and dearest friends. You know, really very tight friend. And he's the one who talked Harvey into doing Bad Lieutenant. I mean, Harvey read the first 5 pages of that script, threw it in the garbage. Right? And Victor called him up and said, dude, you gotta really, you know, these guys make films. They can really make films, you know, they know what to do. And they read it. So then he got Harvey to at least take the thing out of the garbage and get to the one scene that he loved in the script that we didn't even use. It was the confessional, right? Where the nun goes on for like 9 or 10 pages in the middle of the film. You know, one of Zoe's raps, you know, rants. But, I mean, it read better than it played, I guess. I don't know. But she always would, that would be her thing if you invited her anywhere. So we would do the unfilmed, or the cut out scene of the nun in the confessional. If you want to hear that. Anyway, so that's Victor. You know, he's a great loss because he was a great supporter of everyone, you know, from the Puerto Rican community, which he was from, to, you know, everybody. I never met anybody who really didn't like him, you know what I mean? Right. I was working with Walken, and so Bad Lieutenant was written and for him, you know, and it was, you know, Chris is a funny guy, and we were doing the rehearsals, and he was going to do it, and Pressman were financing the film. It took a long time to finance that film, you know, I mean, if I told you how many times I pitched that, and if you talk, and you know, with Ed, you're like, you had 1 o'clock in the morning with a bunch of blue-haired old ladies, then he's saying, they're very rich, tell them a story. And he'd be like, and the policeman is smoking the crack? Yeah. What do you mean, not the policeman is smoking the crack? Yeah, the policeman is smoking the crack. And I tell us a 90-year-old woman, who supposedly has a lot of money. And then I say, Ed, please, you're killing me, man. You're killing me, I can't do this. So anyway, we finally get the money. We're working with you know, we did a lot, you know, we really shaped that script in a different direction, a funnier direction there. And then we had a meeting on Sunday. It was in Chateau Marmont Hotel. And I remember I'm sitting there, and it wasn't, we weren't making a move for a lot of money, but there was gonna be money, and I needed it, okay? And there's Ed, and I never forget, his feet didn't even reach the ground. And there's walking, you know, sitting there on the couch. And then he says, you know something, guys? He says to Ed, he doesn't say to me, he says, you know, I know exactly what Abel wants, and I don't think I could give it to him. I'm like, what the fuck did he just say? And then he looks, he just smiles, he gets up, and he leaves. And like, are you kidding me? Ed is like looking around. And that was me, him in the room, he looks at me, he goes, you think I should go after him? I says, fucking both of you guys, you gotta be kidding me, all right? Then later on, about 3 hours later, Walken calls me up. I'm still sitting in his chair like, oh, shit. And he's going, I think the meeting went pretty well, right? All right, okay, you think, what do you want to do for supper? I go, yeah, okay. Anyway, so then we sent it to Harvey, who I didn't know. And Harvey was just going through a nightmare split up with his little lady. And so he took all of that and took us into that dark hole that became that film. You know, I didn't know Harvey at all, really. He reminded me that I insulted him someplace. He has a grudge against everybody, so he reminded me. So, yeah, you know, Harvey, all he remembers are these things. And he says, you know what you did this time? And, you know, he's waiting for me to buy. I'm sorry, man. I told him sorry. I don't remember a word of it. But, so, and then we went, and then that became that film. You gotta throw the shit away. Yeah, it's a blues. You know, 440 Francis is a virtuoso guitar player, blues player. He's like 60-something. I mean, he actually did, oh man, I keep forgetting these guys' names. Who was a great poet that was in the end of Chelsea on the Rocks? He lived with Chelsea. He was like, you know, in that school at Ginsberg. He used to do records. He was a great beat poet. Anyway, this guy has worked with everyone from making albums with that great beat poet to working with Philip Glass on movies. He's really brilliant, the last 4 or 5 movies. But we never really got to the blues where that's his forte, you know what I mean? So we were trying a lot of different stuff to see where we were gonna go with the soundtrack. And then we came back to like a very basic blues deal, right? And we play actually in Europe, him and I. You know, they showed him, I actually get paid to play, if you can believe that. Okay, you don't want to sit through it, but nobody does. They pay us, but we start playing and people just talk.
Do you play here, too?
No, we don't play here. We play in the shower here. No, we're gonna play. We're gonna do a night in about a week and a half. We're gonna get paid to play. All right. But anyway, his song is hip shake. Hip shake, baby, and he's got this front. Hip shake, baby, it's like the hip baby. So anyway, so we basically wrote this song called the last day out of what you doing today? What you doing today? Throw the shit away, you know. Anyway, so I wrote the words, and I keep writing them, and he'd do the song, and it would sound great. It was really cool. He really hit this on the head, right? And then I changed all the words. Oh shit, we're gonna end up using this song. I better write these lyrics. Then I changed all the lyrics. He goes, why'd you change all the lyrics? I got to do a song to get over again. I go, because people might be listening to it. You know, but when you sing like that, you don't have to worry about the lyrics. So we did try. Okay. So,
did you have another question?
Yeah, no.
You know, that scene where they talk about, I mean, we're trying to work it, but it's tough. It's with Lombardi and the game the great Ice Bowl game that Willem was actually in the stands, and he actually got frostbite, and he actually had a father who was a doctor, but he was afraid to tell him he was frostbite because his father would punish him for being so stupid to be the son of a doctor and get frostbite. So he almost had his foot cut off because he was afraid to tell. So it was a great story. I don't know if we got it across in the film, but now you can see it all. We had the right, we got the rights. We had like, we really were, we're baseball fans. And my father was a bookmaker. So to gamble, I don't gamble because he was a bookmaker and a degenerate gambler and destroyed our family and my mother. So I don't gamble on anything, but we know the gambling and we got that, which is funny because Harvey really is not a sports guy. So with those guys, he would be calling them like Dwight Goodman and David Cohen, like the all-Jewish pitching staff of the Mets. Goodman, Cohen. I said, no, it's David Cohen. It's Gooden, you know. And so no, we did a lot of work on that, you know what I mean, and put that together. And you know, the same thing was getting the newscaster from News One. You don't know how much that changes because we didn't have the actual announcers, right? And you know, you always have the excuses. Well, it's a national game. You don't need the guys. But we got Bob Murphy, who was like, if anybody knows the Mets, he was one of the original 3 announcers, to do. I mean, may he rest in peace. He sat by himself in a room somewhere down in Florida in a little studio and recreated the 7th game based on, I mean, the minuscule notes. I don't know what we told him. But when his voice comes on at the end of the game, that film goes into another gear, you know. Oh, right, okay, so, you know, we don't have really a big budget, right? I don't know if you noticed that, if you saw the film. Anyway, my guy's cutting in LA. If you guys like Italian food, there's a place called Mambo Italiano down on Mulberry Street between Grand and Hester. It's great. My friend, who's a dreamer and a film producer, and he also has 4 or 5 restaurants, gets this giant restaurant that's been closed for 2 years and also John Gotti's favorite restaurant. And now we build an editing room in the cellar, like with a wall. I'm afraid to even bump into the walls, thinking a skull is going to roll out of it, right? And now we have this tiny little editing room. The film is nowhere near being cut. These guys have to see the film. I'm thinking like 1 or 2 of them will come down. One guy will come down. It's a small room. It's 100 degrees. Worst conditions to see anything, right? Tony's in town now. The editor's coming back and forth from LA. Okay, they're gonna come. Now, all of a sudden, a slew of people, like 8 people show up. Like these guys actually all look at films.
There were 5 of us.
Yeah, well, in Italy, like one guy shows and it's up and down. Like you're halfway through the film, it's like this it is, and that's it. You know. Now there was more than 5. There was you, Fundus, a couple of women, the other guy. Right? And
Maybe 6.
The editor. Okay, so and the editor and the assistant had to be there. So now I got 8 people. You got to give them all drinks. You got to make the air conditioner, hold the thing on. You're running upstairs to the restaurant. You're doing the whole deal. But anyway, so it's condensation dripping. It's 100 degrees. I'm thinking, oh man, they come up, so they can't say whether it's in or out naturally because they're going to have to discuss it, right? So how do you talk? What are you going to talk about, right? So now we're feeding them, we're trying everything in the world.
We didn't take it because he fed us.
Called every fucking person we knew, say, call these people up. And then, but you know what the downside was? When you talk about 6 degrees of separation between the people that were in that room, those were like 50% of the film business knew if the film was any good or not off of that screening, right? Considering all the people everybody in that room knows.
What do you mean?
Well, you know X amount of people,
Oh.
and everyone knows X amount of people, and in the end, there's only X amount of people in the film business. So that was like, if that film was a disaster, that night, everybody was gonna know it. I mean, no one had seen the film up to that point.
It was a very memorable screening.
Yeah.
We saw it on a computer. Just fitting for the film in a way.
Yeah, Final Cut. I mean, everybody's cuts on Final Cut, and that's it. So everyone with a big Avid setup.
And it was in a
Feel
cellar,
bad
like a
for you.
blogger's cellar.
It was that cellar, that's right. And I got to get my mother to walk around upstairs.
All right.
Now I think of, no, I tell you, Kelch has got me thinking of like King of Comedy, with that guy downstairs just writing things, and he writes all those blondes. But we have our own website. We got 2 million people, film addicts. We got our own website. We can battle the bloggers.
Oh yeah, can you talk a bit about why you do have a lot of material on your website, which you just launched like
We just
past year?
we just started to do it. Our guy has a really cool thing. We have these young kids working there. There were 2 guys are from Moscow. They're all in judo. They all compete in judo. So does Francesco, who's like 40. The other ones are young kids. We got the cameras. We got the cannons, and we're set up to rock and roll in that. And I like the idea. It's a lot of work, though. To have your own website, and do things. I mean, and the wildest stuff. We're getting like a direct feed from NATO. Okay, actually showing the war that's going on there. Political films. We were going to make a film about revolution in the United States, and this was 1980. This is when the stock market dived on us, and it was a $2 million movie. One time we almost got it, and we gave the budget to these Hollywood guys, and everybody was making the same amount of money. Me, Grips, everybody, because we're all leftists and socialists and whatever. And we didn't get the money. Because saying, how could everybody get the same fee? We thought this is our style. Anyway, it was called Birds of Prey, and it broke my heart, and I spent much too much time trying to get that, and it was that or die and all that bullshit, you know what I mean? So I don't want to get into Dream Project. I want to do Jekyll and Hyde. I want to do another thing. We just wrote the script to The Last Day in the Life of Pasolini. All right, a film about Pasolini. That's my dream project. Willing to play Pasolini. I mean, he speaks Italian well enough that he could act with Italian actors and also with American actors. And, the story of The Last Day in his life was there was the negative stolen from Salo. There was in Italy, you never really know what happened. But supposedly this footage was taken from Casanova and Salo in another film, and it was lost. And you can imagine, this is almost a comedy. You can imagine Carlo Ponti, they wanted $1 million for it. And Ponti's telling these guys, hey, you wanted 2 cameras, use the footage from the other camera. I'm not paying $1 million. He's not paying $1 million for the negative. So they basically cut that film on the outtakes, a lot of it, not all of it. But they found the footage after it. The night he was killed, he thought he was getting his footage. He was going to meet these guys, theoretically, to get his footage. So, not only that, there's 2 incredible scripts that he wanted to do, that I want to do scenes from. One is from Hawks and Sparrows, like Hawks and Sparrows. It's with Eduardo Di Filippo, who was like an actor like Totò, and with his lover, Davli. And it was a futuristic world where Rome, not called Rome, was totally gay. Everybody, women and men, everybody's gay. And one day they have the Feast of the Conception, which is everybody just fucks the shit out of everybody else, just to keep the race going. Okay, at Circus Maximus. Now imagine that scene. Okay? I mean, okay, those are the kind of films I want to make. Well,
the film's going to focus on the last day of his life. So I assume, in terms of the circumstances of his death, there are different theories circulating. I mean, how are you handling that in the film?
Yeah, we're going to try maybe a Kurosawa way of doing it. There's actually, it's a little touchy now because they are now reopen the case, but people who really are going to get it, because obviously, I mean, there's guys, people, who knows whatever happened. But if it was a political assassination, those people, might still be alive, and he didn't die because, he basically, his thing was, one of his final journals were, I know who set the bombs off. I know who killed Mattei, who was this great leftist oil man who was killed in another quote-unquote airplane crash. And he said, I mean, the great thing that I love, his journalism, he said, I don't want to hear about conspiracies, man. Conspiracies, are for the weak, okay? It's so easy to talk about conspiracy, this, that, and the other thing. I'm going to name names okay? I'm gonna talk about people. I'm not gonna talk about conspiracies, okay? And these people were gonna stand up. And